Okay.
We're rolling.
Okay. David Byrne, thank you very much for participating. One thing, my questions and me as an interviewer, I will not be heard in the
Okay,
tape.
so I should try and incorporate the
Incorporate and elaborate and speak freely as you wish.
Okay.
Okay. David, what interested you or motivated you to reach out and incorporate more Latin or Afro-Cuban rhythms into your music?
I moved to New York in the mid-'70s, and pretty shortly after moving there, living in the village, I noticed that there were a lot of clubs nearby that featured Latin music. One of the places I lived was right around the corner from New Yorican Village, so I'd be going to sleep with conga rhythms in my ears. It was part of the environment in New York, and it still is. So naturally, after a while, I said, hey, I'm going to check this out. I'd go to out dancing with friends at the Corso Ballroom, which no longer exists. And I'd go hear bands jam with jazz greats at the Village Gate on Monday nights. Stuff like that, where you're walking around the corner and hearing some of the best music that the city has to offer. Some of the best musicians and bands on the continent, and they're right there. So I got into the music.
What, if you had to pick out some names of that music scene, of tropical music that were involved in that music, the great ones, who would you say they were?
I was going out to hear bands, and I got into the music live before I started really buying records. And I would see Ray Barretto at the Corso and Celia Cruz at either SOBs or Village Gate, Machito, Tito Puente, Willie Colon, just amazing bands, just amazing groups. To me, this was, it's live music that swings, has an incredible groove. It's beautiful, the melodies are beautiful. It's very heartfelt. It's not about posing or making a conceptual statement or some kind of weird, perverse attitude or making a sensation in the news. It's about loving music and singing your heart out.
What about Latin music or Latin people or flair or what would you associate with what would be being Latin from your perspective? Because Latin people on their own, they would judge themselves as being, romantic, passionate, with a zest for life. What is your opinion of what Latin culture is?
For me, some of the cliches of Latin culture are true. There is a soulfulness, a lot of heart in the music and in people's lives. There's also a lot of things that maybe people don't realize. That a lot of Latins are very, very proper. There's an emphasis on being genteel, proper behavior, dressing nicely, which is kind of rare in this day and age. It's a kind of pleasant counterpoint to the passion.
Ray Momo, very heavily influenced, perhaps most of all your work most influenced by Afro-Cuban sounds and Latin rhythms. Take us back to when you called Johnny Pacheco. We interviewed Johnny Pacheco. He told us a story about how you two came to work together. Take us back to when you decided that you wanted to coordinate the best of the best and make your album, Ray Momo.
Years ago, Jonathan Demme approached me about doing a song for this movie, Something Wild. And I said, I'm a huge fan of Celia Cruz. I'd love to do a duet with her. Because he said he wanted the song to portray New York as an island. And I thought, that's great. I can write something like that. And I never dreamed that she would agree to it. And then I never dreamed again that they would pull in Johnny Pacheco to help me out. Jerry Masucci from Fania Records was helping out. It was kind of an amazing dream team, whatever. Ray Barretto was playing congas on the song. It was just amazing. And it was the first time I'd worked with any of those people. They were all very generous about working with me. There was no feeling of suspicion or what's he doing to our music or whatever. And what I was doing was not strictly proper. I was mixing things up, changing things around a little bit. But I was thrilled with the way that song, Loco de Amor, worked out. Celia and I had a great time singing it. We performed it a few times here and there. And so that's just spurred me on to want to continue and work with these musicians and other Latin musicians on more projects.
Comment on the appeal that Latin music can have towards non-Latin audiences in this country. Can Latin music or Afro-Cuban rhythms cross over in a mainstream circuit? My answers too long? No,
you want me to keep them? You want me to keep them shorter?
No, you can.
All right. Okay. Whatever. At present, for the most part, there's still, I still feel a big separation between, say, the Anglo, rock, whatever music scene and the Latin music scene. Occasionally something crosses over. There was some, years ago, there was some boogaloo hits that crossed over. And before that, of course, mambos, rumbas, cha-cha-chas, everything was just huge all over New York, all over the country. But at present, there's a separation. I think that'll change. If anything, if for no other reason than that Latins represent such a large percentage of the U.S. population, and that's going to just keep growing as the years go by. And so if nothing else, money talks, and the record business, the multinationals are going to notice that, hey, Selena or whoever is selling millions of records, and we don't even know who she is. We've never heard of her, whatever, and then eventually they're going to turn their heads around. It's going to be like the Garth Brooks phenomena, where most of the record executives and writers had never listened to country music. And then when they finally, SoundScan gave an accurate reporting of what records were selling and how many they were selling, they realized that these country records are selling more than the rock records. And the same thing's going to happen with some Latin records, if not now, in the near future. And then people are going to turn around because it's hitting their pocketbooks.
What would you say is the mission of A Luaka Bob, your record label, in terms of its spreading, trying to diffuse this music to this mainstream audience?
At A Luaka Bob, we don't have any mission. We're not missionaries, we're not a school, we're not teachers or proselytizers or anything like that. We just, we hear music that we love that other people are maybe missing. And since we can't compete with the huge bucks for whatever, many things, we find that here's something that people are missing that is just incredible. It might be a Peruvian singer like Susana Baca, or salsa, Latin salsa, Latin ska band like King Chango. Another group we're working with is a Venezuelan group called Los Amigos Invisibles, which is kind of mixing rock and salsa and various kinds of sounds. To me, it's some of the greatest stuff that's happening at the moment.
Let's go back a little bit. Tell me, in your opinion, how important do you think Celia Cruz has been to salsa music or tropical music?
For me, Celia Cruz epitomizes a lot of what is great about Latin music. The intensity and passion in her voice and her kind of vivacious personality and stage persona, and her choice of songs. The records are just great to listen to. They're filled with great songs.
And Describe with words, what is salsa music? What type of rhythm? Or what kind of elements distinguish it, and one can actually place it in its pattern as Latin or Afro-Cuban rhythm?
Many people would say that salsa music is actually Afro-Cuban music under another name, that it was called salsa in the, I guess, the 60s to differentiate it so that all the Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, everybody else who was playing it felt like it was also their music and not just music for by and for Cubans. But it changed too in the late 60s in New York. What's come to be known as salsa is a little bit harder. It's a little harder sounding, a little edgier, a little rougher than kind of traditional Afro-Cuban music.
Okay, those are all the questions I have for the segment on salsa. I want to. Okay, now salsa. I want to. Okay, now discussing Latin rock, more of a focus on your work in rock and alternative rock. How did the sound of the Talking Heads and how you figured in the sound, how did it slowly become more interested or more heavy on Afro-Cuban rhythms?
With Talking Heads, we kind of went through this bizarre process of reinventing the wheel, where we kind of would kind of break everything down to nothing, and then reinvent ourselves piece by piece as kind of a funk band that had, you know, African rhythms, funk, little bits of Latin rhythms, things in it. And for us to arrive at that, we kind of had to completely break everything down to nothing and then start over again, rather than sounding like another band that was incorporating those kind of rhythms. For me, it was a revelation, because not only did I enjoy the sound of it, but it changed the way I felt on stage. It made me feel less able to portray the kind of angst-ridden character that I often was playing on stage. And it was very liberating.
Describe the period of time between the last Talking Heads album and Ray Momo in the surrounding immersion of Latin music and rhythms that you were very interested in continuing to experiment with.
After I'd done the last Talking Heads record, I decided I wanted to do a record incorporating many of the Latin rhythms and styles that I was hearing around New York, and working with as many of those players as was possible. So I wanted to write a merengue, a cumbia, cha-cha-cha, salsa songs, a samba. I was hearing all this stuff in clubs and ballrooms, on records around New York, and I thought, the players are right here, right at my doorstep, some of the best in the world, and that could be really great. I could have a nice time. It could represent not only what's happening in New York, but what's happening all across the Americas. I had a great time doing that record. I had a great time doing the tour after it. We toured the US, Japan, Europe, and South America. Oddly, in South America, it's a little bit like the expression taking coals to Newcastle. But oddly enough, it wasn't. It was playing salsas and sambas and cumbias and merengues for what essentially was a rock audience, say in Buenos Aires or Santiago or wherever. This was an audience that really didn't know salsa or cumbias that well. So it was like me, this kid from New York, bringing them music from their neighbors, if you know what I mean. It's a really strange situation to be in. But I think something happened. I think something came of it. I think maybe it inspired some people to look around and create music that has had more unique cultural identity.
Tell me about the audience, or from the fans of the Talking Heads, and when you incorporated more of Latin rhythm in your first album, did you retain your audience from the Talking Heads in the general audience, and did you also add now a whole new field of Hispanics or Latino-loving audiences? Comment on the changes of your audiences in appreciating the music, of which you've gained or lost or incorporated into a more uniform audiences.
You know, as far as the audience goes, I'm not sure. Sometimes they follow along with. Okay.
Did you follow? Did you want this to happen, or how would you comment on that changing audience?
Well, I found out that with Talking Heads and with my own material, that sometimes when I did something new, an audience would follow along with me. Other times, some of the audience would go, "No, we're not going there. We don't like that. Go ahead and do that, but we don't like that." But sometimes you'd encounter a new audience. You'd win over a new or different audience at the same time. So sometimes it would kind of balance out, and it was always a risk, but you kind of got to do what you got to do.
Now, what would you say? Yeah, that's good. What would you say is Latin rock, or is this, or the figures of Latin rock? Do we go back to Santana, Los Lobos? What makes the term Latin rock?
For me, Latin rock is music that has the energy and the attitude and the kind of contemporary references of rock, but is incorporating different kinds of rhythms, different kinds of sounds, and different kinds of styles, as well as incorporating rock and roll stuff. I hear it's emerging all over the continent, not from one center. It's not like salsa really took seed in New York. Latin rock is happening in New York, in Florida, in Mexico, in Caracas, in Buenos Aires, all over the place. And what's interesting to me is a lot of the bands that are coming up are mixing in elements of their own national rhythms, sounds, and instruments, and styles, and attitudes, but then mixing that with kind of rock and roll stuff, or dance music, or whatever. And they've created something completely unique, and it's all coming from this network of cities all across the continent.
How important has Carlos Santana been to Latin rock?
Oddly enough, none of the Latin rock musicians that I've worked with mentioned him at all. He doesn't seem to be a touchstone for them, as far as I know.
How about Los Lobos?
I think the last few records of Los Lobos have been encouraging for some of the Latin rock musicians in Mexico and Caracas, wherever. The fact that they don't sound like a typical rock record, they don't sound like a typical Latin record either, that they're actually creating something new, which is what these bands are doing in different places. So there's a kind of encouragement that that's happening in Los Angeles as well.
And how about the emerging term that from Latin rock we now have rock en español? groups like Maldita Vecindad
Mhm.
that you've worked with as well, and they're figuring into the show. Comment on this new wave and what that audience in the USA is that music is gearing toward, with the music of Maldita Vecindad, Fabulosos Cadillacs, or the whole rock and espanol scene. Where are we heading?
My understanding is that the rock and espanol scene is very, very different in its origins from the rock and roll where it came from 20, 30 years ago. It's a scene that comes from children, a generation that's aware of American consumer culture, but they're also aware of their own culture in whatever country they live in. They're aware of European culture. It's kind of a global thing. It's not about a sound in Memphis or New Orleans or Nashville or whatever. It's created by people who have a very global pop awareness. And you can sense that in the music, whether it's from Fabulosos Cadillacs or Café Tacuba, Puya, or gosh, I could go on and on.
How did you find yourself working with Maldita Vecindad?
Actually, I didn't work with them. I worked
with
with
Fabulosos Cadillacs.
No, with Café Tacuba.
Café Tacuba.
Yeah.
See.
Okay.
It's on the same album, the Reconquista
Yeah,
album.
yeah.
Yeah.
I worked.
Café
Tacuba.
Tacuba.
Yeah.
See.
Okay.
It's on the same album, the Reconquista
Yeah,
album.
yeah.
Yeah.
I worked. I've been a fan of Café Tacuba for a number of years, and at some point, I was approached to do something for an AIDS benefit record, Silencio Igual Muerte, and I said, of course, well, I'd love to do something with Café Tacuba, and I have this tune that I've half written. I have this kind of weird merengue type thing that I've half written that I could send to them, and they could maybe finish it up. So we did a thing together in the studio. Then I ended up singing on another song that they'd done. They did a version of No Controles.
What would you say will not change about the sound of Latin rock or rock en español? What is one element, not necessarily a sound element, but an element, whether it's in the lyrics or in the nature of the sound? What will not change in Latin rock?
What will not change? I have no idea what.
Well, because you like to change.
I have no idea what's not going to change.
The bass of the sing, or the tone of, probably more so in salsa that retains a little more of a song and a driving beat. And tell us about your record label's methods or trying to diffuse Latin rock and acts like King Chango to an American audience.
I have a small record label, A Luaka Bob, and recently, when I'd go see some of the rock and espanol acts who would play in New York, whether it was the Cadillacs or Café Tacuba, whoever, I'd see this band opening for them, King Chango, this Latin ska band, that were really good on stage, and every time I saw them, they were better. I kept saying to the other people in this small company, hey, check these guys out, they're really good. We should sign them. And